Michael Lewis wrote a book about his friend Jim Clark entitled The New Thing. It was a biography about how his friend took three companies, built them up to $1 billion apiece, and sold them off during the dot-com years of the 90s. He said during that time, before he ever became successful, Jim came to Michael and said, "Michael, if I can just make $1 million, I will be satisfied." And he did. He came back to Michael a second time, and he said, "Michael, if I can just make $10 million, I'll be satisfied." He did. He came back to Michael a third time and says, "Michael, if I can just get $1 billion after taxes in the bank, I'll be satisfied." He did. And then he came back to Michael and said, "Michael, I guess money just doesn't satisfy." In his book, here's what Michael says about his friend, Jim Clark. He says, "No matter how well Jim Clark does for himself, it's always 2 o'clock in the morning in his heart, and he is lying awake." I think Jim learned a lesson that we all need to learn, and that is that money does not satisfy. One of the lies that Satan tries to perpetuate among all of us is that money can satisfy us, that if we just have enough money, if we just have enough things, if we can somehow get to a place where we have accumulated a certain amount of wealth or a certain amount in our 401k, or we drive a certain amount of car, we live in a house that's a certain amount of square feet, that somehow that is going to satisfy the deep longings in our soul. And it's a lie perpetuated by Satan through our culture, and it's very easy for us to buy into it, especially considering the fact that the advertising industry spends billions of dollars every year to try to convince us that we're not satisfied with what we have, that we need something else to satisfy us, and if we buy their product, if we go out and purchase what they are offering, that somehow their product is going to make us more satisfied with our lives. And so we get on this wheel where we just keep accumulating and accumulating, and yet the whole time we're accumulating, we never find satisfaction in our souls. And so in this series, talking about leaving a legacy, our third lesson here is a teaching on contentment. And one of the things that a disciple of Christ, that if we're going to have the character of Christ and look like Jesus Christ, we need to be people of contentment. And Jesus made a couple of comments about contentment, and then Paul made a couple of comments about contentment that I want to share with you on this video here for the next 15 or 20 minutes. And then I'm going to draw some applications for you and give you the secrets to contentment. So let's jump right in and let's look at what Jesus says about contentment in Matthew chapter 6. And what he tells us is that so much of contentment in life is determined by who or what we decide to pursue. And there's 3 different verses here I want to read and just comment on quickly. Beginning in verse 19 of Matthew chapter 6, Jesus says this, "Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, for where moth and rust do not destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal." And here's the key right here, verse 21. "For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." Jesus says there's a truth about life that you have to understand, that you have a chance to pursue God, or you have a chance to pursue things of this world, specifically money and material possessions. And you really can't choose both. You really have to choose one. And where you choose to pursue, that's where your heart is going to go. And where your heart goes, that's where your treasure goes. And so he says you just have to understand that that's a truth about your life, that you can't balance and absolutely be sold out to God and be sold out to money and let those coexist. One or the other is going to dominate your life. And so what you have to do is you have to make the decision, what am I going to pursue? Am I going to pursue the holy God with all my heart, or am I going to pursue possessions and things of this world with all my heart? And that decision puts you on a complete different trajectory for where your life is going. One leads to contentment, one leads to dissatisfaction. He comes down now in a couple of verses later here, and he says, "For no one can serve 2 masters. Either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and wealth. You cannot serve God and money. That's where the dichotomy is. That's where the line is drawn. You have to choose which one you're going to pursue. Is God going to be what you pursue, which is going to lead to a life of contentment? Or is money going to be what you're going to pursue, and you're going to end up like Jim Clark, where you're in your heart, it's always 2 o'clock in the morning and you're lying awake. There's no peace. There's no contentment in your heart. Finally, he wraps up this teaching in verse 33 and says, but seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you as well. In other words, what Jesus says is there's a decision point in every person's life. And the decision point is, who am I going to worship? Am I going to worship the God who created me? Or am I going to worship money, the created thing? Am I going to have an idol of money? Or am I going to worship the holy God? And that trajectory leads me to very different places. If I seek first God's kingdom and he is God, then all of this money stuff, it's going to take care of itself. He says here, all of that will be added to you as well. So God says, I'm going to take care of the money and the financial part, but what I need you to do is back off in your life of making money your God and what you pursue with your whole heart. I want you to pursue me with your whole heart, and then trust me that I'm going to give you the ability to have all the money you need, all the possessions you need, but here's what's more important: contentment in your heart. Because Satan is trying to convince us, if I can just buy and earn and save and collect, I'm going to have contentment in my heart. I'm going to be satisfied. But the lie is, it just never satisfies. So God is giving us a truth here through the teaching of Jesus Christ in Matthew chapter 6, where he's trying to set us free from the bondage and the slavery of dissatisfaction, the discontentment of pursuing God as my idol. Wealth as my idol. And instead coming over and saying, pursue God. Don't ever let that wealth be an idol, and I will take care of the rest. So now Paul comes along and gives us 2 verses of Scripture where he is now going to talk about this whole contentment aspect as well. Now, in Philippians chapter 4, verse 11, Paul says this: I am not saying that because I am in need, I have learned to be content, whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. And then Paul says this in 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 6, but godliness with contentment is great gain. For we brought nothing into this world, and we will take nothing out of it. But if we have food and clothing, we will be content with that. People who want to get rich fall into temptation and a trap and into many foolish and harmful desires that plunge men into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. Some people, eager for money, have wandered from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs. These 2 teachings, as I looked at them and just asked the question about contentment, what I decided to do was kind of put them up one against another and contrast them. And in both of these teachings, in 1 Timothy chapter 6 and in Philippians chapter 4, what I did on a piece of paper was I wrote down on one side, pursuing God with all my heart, and what that leads to is contentment from Matthew chapter 6. And on the other side is pursuit of money, and money being my idol, and what that leads to is discontentment or dissatisfaction. And then I just kind of listed everything that Paul said here. And here's the list I came up with. Listen to the pursuit of God and contentment. Contentment is a secret revealed by God. Contentment is not based on circumstances. Paul says, I've learned to be content in any circumstance. That's so key to understand, that contentment is not based on circumstances. Because when I'm pursuing money, what I'm believing is contentment is based on a circumstance, and if I just have enough money, if that circumstance happens, I'll be content. What did Jim Clark find out? Doesn't matter how much money you have in the bank. Contentment in my heart never comes through a circumstance. It's not based on circumstances. What's it based on? The condition of my heart. And the condition of my heart is made whole through what? My relationship with God. That's where contentment comes from. It's a gift from God. It's not something I pursue or earn. It's something given to me as a gift from God when I have my priorities straight. Contentment is a godly trait. Contentment is a perspective of gratitude, and this is so important. Contentment and gratitude are tied together. If I'm contented, the reason I'm contented is because I have great gratitude. I'm thankful for what I have. I've learned how to look at everything I have and focus on what I have and be grateful for that instead of focus on what I don't have and I'm ungrateful for what I don't have. Difference in perspective, difference in attitude, but it's the difference in dissatisfaction and contentment. Try in your life to take everything that you have and just focus on what you have and the gifts that you have and thank God for that, instead of spending your time listening to commercials, obsessing over everything you don't have. When I'm focused on what I don't have, I'm discontented. When I'm focused on what I do have and I'm grateful and thankful for what I do have, contentment reigns in my heart. Now, the result, according to Paul here, is great gain, godliness, and satisfaction or contentment. Okay, now you look on the other side, the pursuit of money or dissatisfaction. When I'm pursuing money as my idol and I'm not pursuing God with all my heart, here's what he says: the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. The love of money is a trap with many temptations. The love of money leads to faith compromises. The love of money leads to foolish and harmful desires. Now, I want you to just think about every one of those. He said it's a trap. It's the root of all kinds of evil. It's foolish, harmful desires. It leads me to make faith compromises. Now listen, it's so important for you to understand this. He's not talking about money. He's talking about the love of money. It's what's going on in my heart again. Money is amoral. Money is neither right or wrong or good or bad. And listen, very important for you to know. I know contented people who are very wealthy and contented people who are very poor. I know discontented, dissatisfied people that are very wealthy and dissatisfied people that are very poor. It's not about dollar amount, and it's not that money is good or bad or evil. It is amoral. What it's about is what's going on in my heart. Am I thankful? Am I full of gratitude? Am I focusing and pursuing God, knowing that he's going to add all these other things to me as well? Or have I bought into the line from the evil one that I can find contentment in things, and I'm pursuing those things, and in pursuing of those things, I'm discontented? In fact, listen to what Paul says is the result. The result, when my heart is focused on money and the love of money, I have many griefs, I have ruin, and I have destruction. Isn't that interesting? Many griefs, ruin, and destruction. So I just want you to get this picture clear, and I know I'm repeating myself, but it's so important for you to get this and understand this. One of the secrets of the character of Christ is learning to be content. How do I learn to be content? By pursuing God with all my heart, by being thankful and full of gratitude for what I have, and trusting that in that God is going to give me everything I need, instead of in my heart pursuing things of this world, thinking that those are going to satisfy the deep longings of my heart, because they are not. Because they are not. And so I want to just close this short teaching by giving you what I call the 3 secrets of contentment. Look at contented people, and they just fundamentally function different from discontented people. And contented people, I think, have 3 focuses. Contented people focus more on relationships than on riches. They focus more on relationships than on riches. Think about it. If I was to take you and sit you down in a room and say, give me the 3 greatest memories of your life, my guess is they're going to have very little to do with things that you've purchased. I don't think you're going to tell me, oh, the best day of my life was the day I finally got the Mercedes-Benz. The best day of my life is the day I finally got to buy the house that I wanted to buy. No, the best memories of your life are about family, or about friendships, or about marriage, or about relationships. Relationships are so much of who we are and what we're about. Contented people learn it's not about money. It's not about riches. It's about relationships. So in your pursuit of God, you're also pursuing other relationships, understanding that money's going to take care of itself. Do you work hard? Absolutely. Do you want to be successful? Of course you do. But that's not your God. That's not where you put your hope. That's not what fills your heart. What fills your heart? Pursuit of God. And then I understand that the most important things in my life are my relationships, my kids and my friends and my spouse. And from that, I derive great contentment. Contentment, remember, is a gift from God following me as I do things the right way. So contented people focus more on relationships than riches. 2, contented people focus more on mission than on money. You know, there's a big question you have to ask yourself in your life, and that is, why was I made? Why was I made? What is my purpose here on earth? And what I found is contented people have figured out why they are put here on this earth. They found their purpose. They have connected in with God. They have started pursuing God with all their heart, and God has shown them why He created them and what He wants them to do in this world and how to mirror His image in all the different relationships and things in their lives. And they're so centered on what their purpose is, and because they're centered on their purpose and on their mission, and they know why God has created them, and they know what God has designed for them and what God is going to use them for, and so they don't focus on money. They focus on the mission. They focus on being an ambassador for Christ. They focused on their job being a place where they fulfill God's plan for them. They focus on their family as a place where God's going to fulfill His plan for them. And they focus on the mission instead of on the money. And guess what happens every time? The money takes care of itself. And so contented people focus more on mission than on money. And then number 3, contented people focus more on eternity than on earnings. They focus more on eternity than on earnings. Listen, one of the things that I hope that you will learn to do in your life, and it's so important, and I know it's been important to me, is we've got to learn how to make decisions where we're looking with eternity in mind. The decisions I've made in my life that I've mostly regretted are decisions where I didn't think about the long-term consequences, where I thought about the next 15 minutes instead of the next 15 years. When I thought about what's happening in the here and now instead of what's going to happen later on. What's best for my family later? What's best for my kids when they're grown? What's best for my eternity living with God forever? And I found that contented people, they don't focus on decisions for the here and now. Contented people learn how to focus on decisions that are going to affect them in 10 years and 20 years and after they die. And you think about the lie of the evil one, that money can buy happiness or things can satisfy us. And what is that? Those are quick decisions. Those are quick decisions. I want to get this now because that'll make me happy. I want to do this now because that will make me happy. What does a salesman always want you to do? You get the deal if you make the decision when? Today. Because if you wait to make the decision, you're going to make a decision that's not going to get you to buy my product. So if you'll make it today, I'll give you a 20% discount. They don't want us to go home and think about it. They don't want us to go home and ponder it because they know that contented people have learned how to look at the long-term view and not the short-term. And they want to sell you in the short-term. And those are the decisions, and I'm telling you from experience, those are the decisions that I regret in my life. And so as you think about leaving a legacy for your family, someday for your kids and your grandkids and the generations to come, and you want to build this great family, part of what you want to give them is you want to give them the secret of contentment. You want to help them see what it means to live a contented life. A successful life, sure, you want to be successful, but not a materialistic life, not a life sold out to the love of money, not a life sold out to trying to find happiness in things. You want to build a life and leave a legacy that says, you know what, I've learned the secret of being content. I focus on relationships. I know my mission and purpose in life, and I'm satisfied with that. And I'm looking at the long view of eternity in mind, and I want my family and my kids and my grandkids to learn how to live those 3 secrets out, knowing that God is going to bless me with a secret of contentment, a gift from God that He gives me as a result of me, what? Pursuing Him first and trusting in Him, Matthew 6:33, that all of these things will be added to me as well.